Hello and welcome to Informal Fallacies Part 2. This time we'll be talking about ad hominem, including the versions of guilt by association and two wrongs make a right, as well as the fallacies of appealing to common practice or tradition, appealing to ignorance, non sequiturs as irrelevant reasons, equivocation, ambiguity, composition, division, and the slippery slope fallacy. It should be noted that the first four fallacies, those highlighted in blue there, are all fallacies of relevance. That is to say that they are fallacies because they urge one to reach conclusions based on reasons that are not germane to the argument. Just as in part 1 of our informal fallacy discussion, it should be remembered that most informal fallacies have versions that are not fallacies. Appealing to irrelevant information is always fallacious, but determining whether, for example, ignorance or lack of information is actually irrelevant is the trick. Likewise, composition, division, slippery slopes, and some of the others are not always fallacies either. The ad hominem fallacy is the fallacy of attacking the person instead of engaging the argument a person is making. One commits this fallacy when, instead of attacking the reasoning or premises of an argument, one attacks the person or persons making the argument instead. In some cases, the fallacy is committed when one attacks the person whom the argument is about. Here are some examples. Ben Franklin wasn't a great inventor, he was a sex maniac. This is a fallacy because how often and with whom Franklin engaged in sex is irrelevant to whether or not he invented useful devices. Or take this example. We shouldn't listen to Senator Pushbutton's views on the budget. After all, he is a Washington insider. Again, the senator's views on the budget may be accurate even if he is a Washington insider. Of course, one needs to be careful. Not all attacks against a person are fallacious. One might legitimately question an expert's credentials, for example. If somebody had an opinion about black holes, and I pointed out that he wasn't an astrophysicist but an astrologist, that's hardly irrelevant. Or even if the person was an astrophysicist, his reputation in the scientific community might be relevant. After all, we cannot be experts in all fields ourselves. In order to know whom to pay attention to, we have to evaluate the quality of their expertise. Likewise, it might not be irrelevant to question the quality of somebody's character if that person is giving testimony of some kind. Is this person known to lie? If so, is this person saying something that is self-serving? If somebody has a great deal to gain by holding a position, that might not be reason to dismiss it outright, but it may be enough to look at it more closely. If, with the Washington insider example, a senator who was receiving a great deal of money from the oil industry was saying that a bill reducing regulations on offshore drilling was harmless to the environment, that might be a reason to look carefully at what others have to say. But the senator could be right. The bill could be harmless. Looking at self-serving interest is a good warning sign, but it isn't enough to dismiss a claim outright. The question you should be asking yourself regarding ad hominem attacks is whether the attack is in fact relevant to what the arguer is trying to persuade you of. Here are two examples of ad hominem attacks. The Rush Limbaugh example was mentioned in the book, so I thought I would find it on YouTube for you. On the left is an ad hominem attack by liberal commentator Chris Matthews. You can pause the PowerPoint with the menu at the bottom of the screen, then click on the images to open up YouTube. When you click back to the PowerPoint, it should resume. Here is one more ad hominem attack ad, but this one illustrates guilt by association. In other words, the target is being attacked because of who that person knows. Some real policy issues are also raised in this ad, so the whole thing isn't fallacious, but it contains guilt by association as well. The two wrongs or two quote version of the ad hominem fallacy is committed when the arguer states or implies that her or his own wrong is nullified because her opponent in the argument or her victim committed a similar wrong. For example, suppose that person 1 says, "You really shouldn't waste electricity," and person 2 responds, "You're one to talk. You have enough Christmas lights up in winter to illuminate a landing strip." This is a fallacy of relevance because even if person 2 wastes electricity and is being hypocritical and telling person 1 not to, that doesn't mean that it's morally right for person 1 to waste electricity. Here's an example of the two wrongs fallacy from Garfunkel and Oates. Alright, appeal to tradition or custom. One commits this fallacy when one takes as a reason to do something the fact that it has customarily been done that way. For example, imagine that prior to 1919, somebody argued that women shouldn't be allowed to vote because it has always been the case that only men were allowed to vote. The mere fact that something has always been done a particular way is not itself an argument that this is the best way to do a thing. The fact that doctors had traditionally used leeches to heal all sorts of diseases for years is not a good reason to keep using leeches. The fact that people traditionally only bathed every few weeks is not itself a reason to keep up the practice. Here's an example of appeal to custom or tradition from an anime series called Ranma 1/2. Appeal to ignorance. This is an important fallacy, and it appears more often than one would expect. One commits this fallacy when one argues that since we don't know about something, X, we therefore know something about X. Alternatively, it can occur when it is argued that because we don't know that Y is false, Y is true. Here's an example. We asked a park ranger what caused these footprints in the woods, and the park ranger didn't know what animal made them. So clearly they were made by Bigfoot. The only thing that we're justified in concluding from the fact that we don't know what made the footprints is that we don't know what made the footprints. We can't reason that we don't know what made the footprints, so therefore we really know what made them. Here Neil Tyson explains the appeal to ignorance fallacy. Of course, appealing to lack of evidence is not always a fallacy. There is an often made quote that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but this is only a partial truth. The failure of a search to turn up evidence when one should expect that it would if the claim were true is a strong mark against that claim. For example, suppose you are missing your keys. You hypothesize that they might be in your room, so you search it from top to bottom and from corner to corner. You go through every item, every drawer, every square foot of the room, inch by inch, and do not turn up your keys. That provides a very strong reason to believe that your keys are in fact someplace else. Just like the failure of a drug test to show the presence of cocaine in somebody's system provides a strong reason to believe that they are not presently high on cocaine. Okay, the non sequitur. Technically, non sequiturs occur any time a conclusion does not follow from the premises, but here we mean it more narrowly to mean an irrelevant reason. So an ad hominem attack, or an appeal to tradition, or an argument from ignorance would all be non sequiturs. You can use the term non sequitur as a catch-all for irrelevant reasons that don't fall into one of the other fallacy categories. So this is just an example from Ralph Wiggum here. Equivocation. Equivocation is a fallacy that occurs when an arguer uses a term with two or more different meanings as if it had the same meaning. So consider the following example. Elephants have trunks. Trunks are a form of luggage, therefore elephants have luggage. What's wrong with this? It looks like a straightforward deduction. All E's are T's, all elephants are things with trunks, all T's are L's, all trunks are things that are luggage, therefore all E's are L's. All elephants are things with luggage. The problem is that we are not really using the same term in both premises. We really have all E's are P's, all elephants are things with prehensile appendages called trunks, all Q's are L's, all boxes known as trunks are forms of luggage, therefore all E's are L's, therefore all elephants are things with luggage. Stated like that, it's clear that the conclusion does not follow. Here is an example of equivocation from Seinfeld, where the woman in the scene is using the term man in one sense and Seinfeld is using it in another. Can you articulate these two senses and why it is an equivocation? Equivocation is a form of ambiguity. Statements could be taken in more than one way. Of course, there are many ways for statements to be ambiguous. Ambiguous statements can often lead to bad reasoning. Of course, it's important to remember that ambiguity often serves an important linguistic purpose as well. Composition. The fallacy of composition occurs when one argues that because every part of a whole has a property, the whole itself must have that property as well. For example, suppose somebody argued that since every room in a hotel was small, the hotel itself had to be small. This does not follow. The hotel might be huge with thousands of very small rooms. An important note though, this isn't always a fallacy. When a property is transitive, that is to say, it can be applied additively to its members, this isn't a fallacy. So if you argue, for example, that every part of a car has mass, so the car has mass as well, that is not a fallacy. The fallacy of division is the counterpart of the fallacy of composition. It occurs when one argues that because a whole has a property, every part of it must have a property as well. For example, suppose that somebody argues that because a sponge is absorbent, every molecule of the sponge is absorbent as well. This doesn't follow. Absorbency is a property that arises from an arrangement of molecules. Again, the important note here is that this isn't always a fallacy. Some properties of wholes require that each part have that property as well. For example, if a textbook is error-free, then every part of that textbook must be error-free as well. The slippery slope fallacy. This is another tricky one because quite often this isn't a fallacy. One really has to think hard about these. One commits the slippery slope fallacy when one argues that if one does something A, B will follow, and that if B follows, C will follow, and so on until there is some undesirable result. For example, suppose that we argue if we make grenade launchers illegal, then we will have to make machine guns illegal. Then we will have to make semi-automatic machine guns illegal, and then we will have to ban handguns and rifles that hold multiple rounds. And then we will have to ban single-shot weapons, and sharp knives, and baseball bats, and pointy sticks, and eventually you won't even be able to get a spork at Taco Bell. So here you see the structure. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. The argument is that if we take the first step, making grenade launchers illegal, A, then we will go to step B, then C, then slide all the way down to where you cannot even get a spork at Taco Bell. So where does this reasoning go wrong? To see where the error is, one needs to ask oneself if there is a reasonable stopping place. If the principle that one is using really would lead all the way to the bottom, then it is a real slippery slope and not a fallacy. So if the principle were, we need to ban anything that could conceivably hurt anybody, we really would slide all the way to the bottom. But chances are that somebody arguing to ban grenade launchers is using a principle like, we need to ban weapons that can easily kill large numbers of people. And if that is the principle, then there is a logical stopping place down the slope. Maybe it is after grenade launchers, maybe it is after machine guns, but certainly it doesn't go all the way down to pointy sticks and sporks. Here is an example of a slippery slope argument from a car commercial. Of course, this was designed to be humorous, not serious, but it does illustrate the point. And that wraps up this presentation. Next time we'll be on to Informal Fallacies Part